South Africa's landmark 2025 G20 presidency draws to a close in the coming days, capping nearly a year of dynamic leadership and culminating in the highly anticipated G20 Leaders Summit in Johannesburg next week. South Africa outlined ambitious priorities to advance Africa's agenda on the global stage. Has it achieved success or fallen short of expectation? In today's our program, we examine outcomes, challenge, and enduring impacts. I'm your host, Berka Sisai, joined by my colleague, Getina Shankote. Stay tuned. Getina, welcome.
Thank you, Berka.
Thank you very much indeed. As I've already mentioned in my introductory, today we are going to focus on the role of South African presidency in the G20. And before we move on to this critical point, I think it's better to look at the imperative, the importance of G20, this multilateral forum by itself. But as you remember, it's established in the aftermath of the financial crisis, which hit hard on the global south, specifically in the south part of the Asia. So how do you look at its importance in terms of, addressing like the challenge that we have been facing by now, not only in the economic aspect as well, but also in the political aspect as well. And then we move on to the other questions.
Yeah, thanks so much, Barakat. Before we move to South Africa's presidency for this year, it's very imperative to give some perspective about the group of 20 or G20, about the platform itself. You know, this is a very powerful platform which brings together the giant economies of the world. As you mentioned earlier, it was established in the 1999 following the financial crisis of the Asian countries. So this platform actually represents almost 85% of the global GDP and also 75% of the global trade, as well as 2/3 of the world's population. And the platform coordinates in macroeconomic policy and address different challenges, especially related to economy, as well as you have mentioned earlier about political and geopolitical challenges in the globe. By the way, this platform, actually, G20, it does not have its own permanent secretariat. It rotates every year. Based on the geographical grouping. There are 5 groups geographically identified to lead the summit to take the presidency, and that's why South Africa this year has already held the presidency. So it is a very powerful institution, platform to lead the global economy and also to pass a very critical decision. And when you come to the recent year, especially this year presidency under the South Africa, it comes in a very critical time because the globe is facing unprecedented challenges in terms of climate change, geopolitical instability, as well as the problem of stable financial credit, especially for developing countries. And inequality is still continue to growing between the developing nation and the developed ones. So South Africa, despite those challenges, really playing an important role under the theme. By the way, this year's theme is solidarity, equality, and also sustainability. And South Africa has continued playing a very important role. It's a lot for African, actually, not only South Africa, but also African countries, I would say.
I will move on to that question, but I think it's better to look at, to add on what you have already said on the importance, the imperatives of the G20 platform by itself. I would like to mention 2 points. The first one is like when the 2008 financial crisis was actually hit hard on the global news, specifically the G20 played a paramount role in terms of just stabilizing the economies during that time. The G20 actually able to expand the International Monetary Fund resources by $500 billion during that financial crisis. Even after that one, like for the past 2 decades, the growth, the development was peaking at the international level, specifically in the global south, mainly in Africa. But the outbreak of the COVID-19, there has been a great pushback on the development. But in that case, the G20 the multilateral forum played an important role in terms of just availing or mobilizing around $11 trillion in liquidity. So that was a very good contribution by the G20 in terms of just stabilizing the economic, or at the same time, we can call it the meltdown of the economic activity. You know, the impact of COVID-19 was not actually simple, or it's not something that we downplayed, you know, because the effect is still, we felt it in many ways, you know. For example, you know, like activities were actually limited because of the COVID-19. For example, you can't fly from one country to another. You know, industries, manufacturing sector was shut down. Retailers were actually also shut down. You know, business were actually the business or the supply chain was actually, you know, in a shutdown. You know, for a long time, and the impact was very much high. And at that time, you know, despite the fact that the G20 was created as a crisis response to the 1997 financial crisis, its role for the past 2 or 3 decades have been evolving and now playing a paramount role in terms of just stabilizing the economy, but also the political aspect, because the economy has also an impact on the political aspect as well. So just to coming to your point, I mean, the presidency of South Africa and the G20, I mean, how do you look at, I mean, it's first, like, what are some of the priorities which were set by South Africa in the G20 when it started like back in 2024 in December?
Yeah, exactly. So the G20 has already expanded its wing, and actually now it's more than 19 countries, including 2 unions, the European Union as well as the African Union lately in 2023 has joined already, by the way. So under the South African, for your question, the South African presidency, there are major priorities, as I tried to mention earlier. The first one is actually, you know, solidarity. And solidarity, with solidarity, rather than creating polarization and geopolitical polarization or just antagonizing relation, it is very imperative to create, you know, a common understanding, a mutual understanding, and also collaborate on development and attaining, especially on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So, by the way, just before South Africa's presidency, Antonio Guterres in 2023, he presented a report of the level of the Sustainable Development Goals, and what he said, almost, you know, only 50% of the Sustainable Development Goals is on the right track. And the major and many of the vast majority projects or plans of the Sustainable Development Goal are obstructed or have been facing various challenges. So what South Africa has the role to, you know, leading this problem and also, you know, solve in a way how to fix these challenges that has been obstructing the Sustainable Development Goals, and calling for countries, especially the giant economies, the G20 member countries, to have a solidarity to solve these challenges. The other is, you know, equality. You know, as we said earlier, you know, inequality is still a paramount. There is an equality between the rich and the poor, you know, between the developing and the developing countries. There is no any, you know, sustainable credits for, especially for developing countries, to change their nation, to develop their economy, to build their infrastructure. So that is another challenge, and South Africa really pressing on this issue and trying to convince those nations, and I think the country was has been very successful, I would say. And the other is sustainability, and how can we sustain those development, and how can we address those challenges. Also, another issue what South Africa has been overseeing see for the last almost 19 months, almost close to a year. Almost this month is going to be ended its presidency. So what does mean it for South Africa, for Africa, is very important to see and to look at in this context also. And I would say, you know, it's the first time the G20 summit, especially under the presidency of South Africa, to be held in African soil, which is very important. And also South Africa, actually as a country, it's a Pan-African nation. It contributed beyond its national interest, and it serves the continent's interest, because any kind of platform, any kind of international organization without Africa is, I think, it does not continue and does not endure its sustainability, because Africa is a majority continent, which is with 1.4 billion population, and it contains an important critical minerals, for instance, which critical minerals in recent time has become one of global competition because of its importance for technology and other materials. So involving Africa is very important. So South Africa has shown this importance in the continent, and also for a good news, the Union itself, the African Union, also a part of and parcel of this platform. So South Africa in this criteria under the theme, you know, solidarity, equality, and sustainability, has contributed a lot, and it's very exemplary for the third world nation, especially for the South cooperation.
Just to add on what you have mentioned, you know, since the outset, back in 2024, when South Africa took the helm of the presidency in December 1, 2024, South Africa outlined 4 priority areas. The first one is inclusive development, as you have been mentioning about, you know, the development that we have been witnessing, specifically for the last 2 or 3 decades, is not something that we are actually aspired to see, you know, because you have mentioned that there is like a very wide gap between the developed world and that of the global south as well. And even within the country, like among the population, among the communities, among the society, there has been a difference in terms of like, I mean, the living standard of the people. So this was one of the objective of South Africa, to just bridge the gap between the low and that of the high economic capacity. And the other one is sustainable finance, you know, sustainable finance and investment. In this case, African countries, specifically, I mean, the global south, mainly African country, has been just calling out for the reform of international financial institution. Now many African countries, now some African countries actually in debt distress, and some of the countries are actually on debt default. They can't afford to pay the debt that they have been borrowing from this international financial institution, and not only from this financial institution, from the sovereign, at the same time from other institution as well. And one of the reason for this is because of the borrowing cost of the cost of borrowing is very much high, and this is actually a result of the credit rating agency also contributed much for this one. For example, if you look at the 3 big credit rating agency, for example, the S&P, the Moody, and the Fitch, they have, I mean, their methodology is not right whenever they rate an African countries at the same time institution as well. So because of that, the risk of premium is very high, and whenever African countries go to this financial institution, whenever they want to get some loan, they get based on, I mean, the cost of borrowing is very high. And South Africa, during its presidency, I mean, voicing about this concern for African, not only for Africa, but also the global south as well. And the other important point that I would like to mention here is one of the major problems when it comes to the global south is there is a food insecurity issue. And there has been much discussion, even in South Africa and apart from South Africa and different parts of the continent, regarding the food security under the banner of G20. And South Africa played its role in terms of just making this issue mainstream in the G20 frameworks. And many countries has been giving due emphasis for this issue as well. And the other important thing that I would like to mention here is the just transition. I mean, the climate change is one of the most critical thing when it comes to in Africa. As we know that Africa contributed only 4% of the global greenhouse emission, but it's bear the brunt of the adverse effect of climate change. And South Africa, like through different initiatives, have been calling out for the international communities to focus on the green transition in Africa. Of course, many African countries has been trying their best to make a just transition in their own country based on the national resource mobilization, but still, you know, many African countries still need some sort of partnership, some sort of support from the global north, and South Africa has been mainstreaming this voice in the global in the G20 in the G20 frameworks, in different frameworks. And this is, I think, what I would like to add, if anything that you would like to add on.
Its presidency is closing, and it's very important to say South Africa has played a very important role in those, efforts, as you have mentioned, in terms of climate resilience, especially how to mobilize resources from the developing countries. Because, as you said, Africa has a very little contribution for the climate-induced impacts, but it's paying dearly for this impact. So South Africa has played a lot in this regard, and also in terms of debt stress, it's very important. Many of the global souls, especially in African countries, are really suffering from debt stresses, and countries, even some of the countries have failed to run their plan in their economic development, to build infrastructure and to run their economy and to fix their inflation rates. So the country also enjoyed its the voice of these nations, and it was really very successful. So I would say in general, and South Africa's role has to be recognized by especially by the global souls, and also supported, and for the future has to be continue in this way, because Africa, especially the global south, for many times has been considered as a subordinate rather than significant decision makers. So this is a signal. The global south, including the African continent, can put its own share for the global action, for the global voices, and also for the global development in all kind of activities. So that was a very important move, I can say.
Yeah. Just to add on what you have mentioned, I think South Africa has played an important role in terms of contributing for the transition of the African agency from like Africa to be transit from policy, receiver to policy maker.
Sure.
For example, recently, we have been defined as a continent. We always receive something from the global north, but now we are actually, contributing for the betterment of the world as well. So we have also some sort of contribution, some sort of resource for the betterment of the world, or the world to move on to a better frontier. So this is, I think, the most important thing that we have to mention in our discussion. I think the second thing we need to mention here is, how do you look at the existence of African Union in the G20 and align with the South African's presidency in the G20? Like South Africa, almost it has been like 25 years since it has been a member of the Group 20, but it's only almost 2 years since African Union joined the Group 20. But I think I would say that they have a similar vision, the similar objectives when it comes to just advancing the African cause, advancing the African priorities. We have been seeing that, like some of the point which was raised by the African Union, also raised by the South African's presidency, because their ideas are very much complement each other, So I think both, South Africa, at the same time, the African Union also play their important role in terms of just mainstreaming the African agenda in the Group 20.
The African contribution here, actually, the African Union as a union in recent time has been demanding for restructuring global institutions. The architecture of the global institutions were not only actually the G20. It's also demanding restructuring even the institutions under the United Nations. For instance, we can mention the Security Council of the United Nations, which of course the Security Council has given to status, but for some this is a kind of humiliation, because without veto power it is humiliating. So it needs to be veto power. But there is a good move from the African Union to have, restructured international organizations, including the Union also continue to demanding financial institutions of the global arena in this case also. So when it comes to its role in G20, it has joined in 2023, and since then it was a great thing, and tried to have its contribution. And under the South African presidency over the last year, the two sides, as you have already mentioned, that South Africa as well as the African Union have the same perspective, actually, how those development agendas, those agendas under this circle, under this platform, has going to be run.
Just to add on what you have already mentioned, specifically when it comes to the reform of the financial institution, African Union has played a paramount role. The reform of the financial institution is very important, and then it's very imperative as well, because the existing frameworks at the international financial institution, both in the World Trade Organization or maybe in the World Bank, as well as on the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, the existing frameworks are not aligned with the African priorities, aligned with the development priorities of the Africa, at the same time to the global south as well. So reforming this institution is not, a thing that you can put on the backseat. You have to give a priority, and for that, South Africa, at the same time, African Union need to be tanked and need to be, given some sort of, acknowledgement for their role. And I think we hope that this will continue in the future as well, even after the presidency of South Africa and the G20. And the other important thing is, for example, the African Union take the initiative to institute or establish the African Credit Rating Agency. Because most of the time we have been complaining about this the credit rating agency of the global north, because most of the time they don't really want to look the perspective of the African. But now African Union takes its own initiative to establish and then work for the interest of the African countries. I think this is a good initiative, and then we hope that it will contribute much for the stability of the African physical space as well. And as you have mentioned, the African representation, most of the time African countries, African interest has been sidelined or marginalized at the global syndicate or clubs, But now many African countries, even the African Union as well, even some friendly country of the global north as well, have been voicing about Africa need to have, its own, the deserved voice at the international fora, sure, at the international institutions. So this voice has been, put forwarded by the African Union in the Group 20 as well. So African Union also has been contributing much for, advancing the African cause in the Group 20. So the other thing that I would like to mention here is, specifically when it comes to investment in Africa, it's very important. The African Union has been calling out for the investors from the international institution and these the big countries in terms of their economy to come to Africa and to invest. And then, because partnership is very important by now, collaboration is very important by now. That's why South Africa make its theme, one of the theme of the South Africa presidency is solidarity. Solidarity, it's all about just partnership, creating some sort of partnership with, the other institutions, the other countries to bring about development, to bring about some sort of positive things in Africa. And for that, African Union, along with South Africa, has played an important role in terms of, just calling out, investors to come to Africa to invest and then contribute their own fair share for the development of Africa as well. Anything that you'd like to add on this?
Yeah, exactly. So in general, South Africa's presidency has pushed for multilateralism and solidarity, and especially to have a good relation and equal entitlement of mutual understanding, rather than creating such kind of distinctive or such kind of lines, the poor and the rich. And it's very important. Unless creating equality and solidarity, the world cannot be sustained in this way, because you know, even it would probably result in you know, peace and insecurity challenges. So what South Africa has shown in this case, it is very imperative, it is very urgent to create equal development and also solidarity. So as you said, you know, South Africa has promoted a lot about you know, development, especially and investment in Africa for the south part of the globe, especially the global south, which is it could seize a lot of opportunities in many ways, the critical minerals as well as other abundant resources that has been conducive for foreign and investors, especially giant global companies. So that was a great move, we can say. And the other thing is probably we will come on this issue, but as its presidency is closing to end, the most anticipated leaders summit is expecting for the coming days.
On the expectation of the leaders summit in Johannesburg, of course, it's going to be, I mean, it's going to be a very historic summit, and it's going to be for the first time on the African soil when the G20 leaders summit is going to be happen. So it's a moment of pride. It's not only the moment of pride for Africa, but also an opportunity to advance an African voice to the on the global stage, on the global forum as well. And I think we do expect a lot from this leader summit. The first one is, I think, G20, of course, for the past 2 or 3 decades have been existed and have been doing a lot of things. And there has, I do expect there has to be some sort of gauging of its performance, specifically in terms of mainstreaming the African agenda, the African developmental priorities. You know, as we have discussed about, we have a lot of, I mean, interest, a lot of priorities when it comes to development in Africa. So this leader summit is going to focus on, in terms of gauging, in terms of just assessing how G20 is contributing in terms of mainstreaming the African priorities, the African developmental interest. And this is going to be, I think, the main discussion point on the table. And the other thing is going to be the financing, you know. As we have been discussing about, the financing regarding to the development in Africa is not enough, or it's fell short of expectation. You know, for example, if you look at the foreign direct investment which is coming to in Africa, which is very much low. You know, we have like a lot of resource, as you have mentioned earlier. In Africa, we have a number of minerals. For example, the critical minerals. You know, we do have a lot of things, but when you come to like investing on these minerals, we don't have that much capacity in terms of financial capacity. So we need some sort of financial support from this financial institution and this developing country as well. But if you look at their contribution, it's very much low. So this is going to be also one of the discussion point of the leaders and in Johannesburg as well. And the other important thing, I think, is the climate finance. As you remember, back in 2016, the developed country, they pledged $100 billion to avail to the global south, mainly to African, because of the loss and damage funds, you know. But this amount of money hasn't been delivered, or they fell short of expectation in terms of just delivering. And this is going to be the main discussion point of the leaders, because Africa has been on the victim side of the climate change. At the same time, we haven't contributed much for the greenhouse emission, but we bear the brunt of the adverse impact of the climate change. So that's going to be, I think, one of the major points of discussion for these leaders as well. I think these are some of the things, but also, for example, the health security and the food security as well because, like, you know, for example, back in 2019 when COVID-19 broke out, you know, it tested the capacity of the international health institution in terms of responding to such a kind of crisis, you know. And because of that, you know, we were not prepared that much to respond to such a kind of outbreaks. And that's why we have lost so many peoples, and so many things were happening because of the COVID-19 and the development. There has been, you know, a pushback on the development side as well. So now we have to have, you know, strong crisis responsive preparedness. You know, many, for example, health institution has been giving some sort of warning, you know, in the future there might be some sort of crisis, health crisis, just like the COVID-19. And for that, we need to prepare ourselves in advance to respond to such a kind of crisis, and such a kind of issues going to be on the table for the leaders. But all in all, the discussion point of this leader is going to be, I mean, it's going to be shaped by the African perspective. I mean, for long, you know, G20 has been talking about, you know, from the lens of the global north, and there has been some critique, you know, which is pointing against the G20 and the likes of other clubs, other syndication as well, because the agenda most of the time dominated by the Western agenda. But now we are going to, I'm very much hopeful that we are going to see a hybrid kind of discussion, because, you know, now the economic imperatives of the African countries going to be on the table. You know, the global South's voice regarding the climate change, finance, you know, different kind of things will be on the table. And of course, they put forward very important solutions. And I think, I mean, the practicality is going to be incumbent on, I mean, the wills of the countries, including South Africa as well, and many countries outside of that club as well.
Yeah, exactly, Barakat. So the much anticipated the G20 Leaders Summit, and actually will be conducted in November 23 to 24, 2025, for the end of this month actually, and South Africa's presidency will be ended in this case. So. We have been expecting lots of practical move and measures, and they could probably declare very important actions that would help, you know, the globe, not only actually the south, the global south, or the northern part of the world. It's very important for the entire world to have a fair and an equitable world to create development, and also to facilitate trade, energy, and health. And they would probably pass a very important decision in this case. The summit in general is really highly expected to have a very important decision for the betterment of the world, and South Africa is also preparing in that way to create a very smooth and seamless and a conference and a summit that would probably contribute a lot, particularly for the continent of Africa and also the global south in general. And we are expecting there will be a bold decision, especially for very critical areas like, as you said, mentioned already, you have already mentioned earlier, you know, food, energy, and health, as well as investment, and also even how we can end such kind of turmoil in the global turmoil, the geopolitical turmoil in various parts of the world, since this summit will bring the giant economies of the world, Barakat.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. We do also expect some positive things to be come out of this G20 Leader Summit in Johannesburg. I think getting that we run out of time, so let's conclude today's our discussion. Viewers, this concludes our discussion for today. Next time we shall explore other issues pertinent to the continent and its people. Until then, goodbye.